Once you start to realize that you can create your own value and you own that, and that there isn't somewhere else to go, you actually have to be the maker of your own destiny. When you actually believe that, you believe it, then you can create a lot of things. And you realize the harder you work, the more focused you are. And that means you have to learn too at the same time. You can't just work hard. You actually have to learn and grow and be aware and be self-aware. There's a lot of things that go in that, but they're not difficult things. You have to be open to growth. Then you can achieve almost anything.
Hello and welcome to the Show Your Value podcast, where we explore the art of value creation in three macro buckets: material value creation, emotional energy value creation, and spiritual value creation. I'm your host, Lee Benson, and today my very special guest is Dr. Ann Kaplan. She is the founder of iFinance, an award-winning entrepreneur, author, television host, and former star of The Real Housewives of Toronto. Ann founded iFinance Canada Inc. in 1996, the parent company of Medicard, PetCard, Dental Card, iFinance Tech, and iFinance Home Improvement, a North American consumer finance company. She has taken the company from startup to one of the largest consumer finance companies in Canada, with loan applications exceeding $1 billion. Recognized as the Canadian Woman Entrepreneur of the Year in 2000, she also received the Award of Excellence for Canada as the recipient of the top honor again as Canadian Woman Entrepreneur of the Year in 15 years later. She has received over 40 international and national awards, is a popular speaker and media personality, hosting numerous television shows, including Global's NYtv, The Ultimate Makeover, and CosmedicTv. Dr. Kaplan is frequently seen on the lecture circuit discussing viewpoints on bank regulation, credit lending, and entrepreneurship. Ann, thank you so much for being here today with me.
Thanks for having me.
As I was reviewing 4 of your books, and I understand there's another one coming out next year, and watching interviews in preparation for this discussion, what really stands out to me is your internal drive. Like, you just keep moving forward. And I'm curious to start this out. Like, where did that come from? Did it start that way? Did you develop it? Where does this come from for you?
So it's interesting you say that. My mother said that when I was born, I just hit the ground running and hadn't stopped since then. It wasn't really an entrepreneurial family, and maybe my dad might have been entrepreneurial, but my sisters certainly did not follow that path. And I don't think of myself as having a lot of drive. I just do, and I don't stop. So I don't stop to think about what I'm doing. I just keep going. That seems normal. That's my normal.
Okay. Well, this is like breathing for you, but it's not for most people. And when I think about holistic value creation, money, material, that's what a lot of people really, talk about, seem to focus on. Even when they're virtue signaling and saying it's not that often, it's really just about the money. But I think the scarcest commodity we have is positive emotional energy and creating value there within ourselves, and then sort of having that go out into the world. And what you exude is this positive emotional energy value that I can see it's going out into the world in the books that you're writing, the interviews that you're doing, and everything else. So if you can talk a little bit about, emotional energy and how you think about that and how you convey it in your work and to others.
So I try to make all my decisions based on my values. So there isn't often that I need to seek advice. I can seek business advice. I can seek advice from people that have experience. But when it comes to making decisions, I look into my core. And there isn't really another answer other than going from your own values. Now, not everybody has the same values or could agree what's a good value or what's a bad value, but I make my decisions based on that type of guide. That's my moral compass when I'm deciding anything to do with business or to do with anything personally. And that doesn't really change.
Yeah, and I think if I look at the business context, the X factor for leaders is how they show up and the energy they bring to it. And some leaders come in and they take the room down. The leaders that have the best positive emotional energy, they lift the room, and it drives even more intrinsic motivation with all the team members. So you've founded a pretty big organization. You're doing lots of stuff all over the world. How's that impacted your ability to do this? I mean, you've got a lot of balls in the air, and I think your emotional energy has a pretty big part in how you're able to keep it together and energize your team to run after it. But describe that.
So I do wear a lot of hats, and one of them is a crown. So it's or a tiara or something, because owning a castle takes a lot of energy. But I focus on the moment. I focus on the business to hand. I probably at any one time, I'm putting 70% of my time into maybe the largest business that I'm running, but it's always about making sure that I am igniting a team and allowing the leadership of those teams that run each business to run that business. And that means it takes a bit of time in between when you open one company to opening another company to make sure you get the right team leaders in place. And I give them a lot of leeway. When I have somebody that isn't working out, I'm very quick to say, this is not working out. We are not going to be working together. But when you do have someone come in, I don't undermine them. I don't step over them. At least I try not to. I try not to say anything directly to other employees or staff or coworkers or however you want to word it that would undermine that of those team leaders. So it's setting the tone down from the top and making sure that you're hiring like-minded people. So I look for skills in people. They must have the skills. But when I talk to them or one of our leaders talks to hiring someone, we're looking for values. So they've got the skills, but we hire for values.
Yeah. It seems like you get hired for what you know and fired for who you are. In a lot of cases, you don't really fit the culture. Do you have a chief of staff that helps you hold all of this together?
I do have one person that in the main business and operating a castle, and she is probably the one that argues with me the most and tells me that I do everything wrong. So she is somebody I will say, well, look, why don't we give this person a raise? And she'll bring me to a point and say, if you give that person a raise, you're going to have to give everybody a raise because it's not fair to single people out. And it's not fair also in the other sense that if I were to say to someone, look, I need to talk to that person, she'll bring me down and say, you need to be that way with everybody. So she'll look at things from another point of view where I'm just not as much a manager as I might be a leader. So she helps me to look at the managerial side of it and the HR side of everything.
Yeah. Well, I view you in the research for this conversation as a very strong leader with an amazing vision of where you want to go, and you've done sounds like a good job of putting a team in place to be able to execute on all of this stuff. And I think one of the challenges in compensating team members is how do you pay them fairly, relatively across the board, for the value they're actually creating. Factoring in supply and demand and wages in a particular region. So it's hard to get it right, but it sounds like you've got a team member that's making sure that we are equitable across the board in terms of paying for outcomes that they're achieving. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and when it looks at compensating people, and I look at that more of the transactional part of a relationship than the transformational part of a relationship with an employee, we pay what is the fair wages and give the benefits, et cetera, that they would get in the same region or same territory or that is expected where they're living. And I do operate businesses in 4 different countries. So there is a difference between country to country to country of what the expectations are. And I've had to learn that the hard way. So generally in a different country, I will hire counsel that will help me through the understanding of how a business is run. But we do compensate at 2 different times of the year for performance, one for performance of an employee. So that's over and above what their salary would be. And one is for performance of the company. But the employee has to have been with the company for the 6 months prior to get that reward. And so if they should leave, they're going to lose out on their 6-month reward, which would be based on the 6 months prior of the business. So there are reasons to say that are transactional, but as long as you're fair, then people will stay for the softer reasons because they like the organization, the cultural reasons.
Yeah, I'm fully aligned with what you're doing. And biggest company that I've started of my 7 so far, and I'm not even close to done. We had about 500 plus folks, and we would give them collectively a percentage of the profit every month, and they get 25% every month, 75% held for end-of-year accumulation. It was directly tied to the value they were creating, and they had to be there to get it. So it's interesting how we're all trying to create value in the world with our organizations, and as long as we're applying math, common sense, logic, and facts, and really trying to do it right, we're coming up with the same stuff, which is what you've done here. And that's always fascinating to me to see that we're coming at it from different angles, but a lot of us are, coming to the same conclusions about the right way to do things.
I think so. And I do feel that it doesn't matter what size the organization is, if you really do have the same issues with employees or people that work with you, that compensation issues and feeling of ownership, leadership, of feeling importance and feeling like they're contributing, all of those issues too are the same regardless of the size of the organization. The hardest challenge I have in buying a castle and starting a business from scratch, and I'm trying to apply everything I've learned from running big organizations, is what do you do when you're losing money what do you do when your costs are thousands of dollars a day initially when you buy a grade 1 listed building and you're setting up a business and you've got 30 employees, but you've got to pull the business in. Maybe I should get them to pay me to work there, because if you do it by the compensation part, they should be. But it's tough when you've got to cheer people on, to say, don't worry, we will make money. And I know that you've been there when you first started out in your first large company, that you had to start to make money.
Oh yeah, and I think about it. Oh, for sure. I think about it a little bit different. It's one way could be, hey, we're losing money. We need to hurry up and become a profitable business. Have a model that works. But my thinking is full on. We're investing now, and this is when we expect to start to get a return. And then this is what the upside looks like for everyone in the medium and long run. And then just keeping everybody aligned to make sure we stay on that journey. Because if we invest all this money up front and then they don't hit the milestones, that's when it becomes, a real challenge. But I'm a believer in making sure everybody understands all the critical points of the journey all the way along. And this is what we have to hit to make this a viable business going forward. And this whole point of compensation, making money, some days selling the company and all of it, it's never felt like a complete answer to value creation, because a lot of employees say, well, I can't get excited about making the owner more money. It's like, well, wait a minute. This is about emotional energy value creation. And then the spiritual value creation in the context of the business is really connectedness, the community, caring for each other, how we feel about working there. And I found that talking about all three of those, as being equally important, has made a really big difference in driving sort of intrinsic motivation within employees. And you're actually talking about all three as well. We're using maybe a little bit different words, but you're talking about all three. Say more about that, because the other two, spiritual and emotional energy, are way more important together than the money side. The money just happens when you get the other two right. Easy to say, and most people roll their eyes and say, whatever, you've made a bunch of money. But talk about that. It's so important.
So that's interesting, because in my younger days, I was one of my fathers. I had 3 fathers. One of my fathers ended up married to a woman who ultimately they split up, but she went on to be she called herself a deva, but a deva in a way that she was more of a guru. And so I've known her since I was a little girl. And as a young teen, I would still visit her, and she would take me to Swami Muktananda, Bhagwan Shri Rajneesh. We went to Deepak Chopra later. We would go and chant in rooms and in larger auditoriums where you go in and take your shoes off. And I'd be the only one with high heels. But when you take your shoes off and you'd sit and chant, Om Namah Shivaya. And So later on in life, when I started to follow more of an academic route, I chose a PhD level to study spirituality. And I was doing a correlation between a spirituality of an organization, a measurement, and the spirituality of the leader of the organization. And it was a direct correlation between the people staying at an organization that had a high level of feeling that there was a spiritual leader. So you would do these tests to measure that and then see if there was a correlation. I ultimately switched at the encouragement of University of Toronto to do more of a quantitative study in finance. But my passion has always been about spirituality and organizational leadership, with encompassing spirituality in that organization. And that's something that you cannot sort of order in. It's just like you cannot yell at your kids and tell them to not yell. You cannot force people to be spiritual, but you can run and operate something in the realms of what we would perceive as being spiritual. So spirituality can have many different descriptions, and some people might call it religion. I don't call spirituality religion. So in my description of spirituality, it would be what you encompass, the values you encompass. So I think you're right in what you said, that we're saying the same thing, but using different words to describe, because it really is in the description and what you interpret something as. But I strongly believe that in anything in life, it's your spiritual being that is what defines you and directs you. But that doesn't mean that spirituality doesn't necessarily even mean you're a good person too, because that's still a description. So I'm not trying to say that if an organization is spiritual, it might necessarily be good, but that is the assumption we have. And so you've got the feeling of having your values encompassed and seen in an organization that is value aligned. So there's a cultural, there's transformational, there's transactional, and there's spiritual levels in organization, and probably a lot more descriptors. But I think you need all to be very positive to have a good organization.
Yeah, and I look at all of that and I just sort of ask the question, is this creating positive value in the world, or is it taking value out of the world from micro to macro? And so that's my standard. So is our culture good? Well, I don't know. Are we creating value in the world, for all stakeholders, team members, customers, shareholders, everyone in there? And so in your interviews, I've heard you talk about marriages. Some can be good, some can be bad. They're a thing. We're all on a journey going forward. And what has struck me here in this conversation is there's a way that people are with each other. So in a marriage that's not healthy, often one or both will be sort of demanding the other get on, their game plan instead of being supportive of their value creation journey in life. And then in business, probably more than not, business owners will decide what's best for everyone, and they're doing them a favor. Whereas I look at it and say, hey, I'm here to support all of you on your value creation journey. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to tumble. We're going to have wins. We're going to do all of these different things. But I'm here to support that. And I found that to create the most value. And it just hit me, what's the difference in that and how we show up for each other than, a marriage that isn't working sometimes. Is that making sense? It's just, I see the correlation.
It is. And in the marriages that I've had, I think it is, it's supporting people to be the best person they want to be, and allowing them on their own path. When it comes to business, I think that would be the same thing, but then you still have a business to run too. And in a marriage, you still have generally you've got a home to run. So you're really, the two CEOs of a home unit that has to be functioning. And I would say that would be the same in business, that you've got to do that and make sure that everything runs cohesively. So you do need to be value aligned in both scenarios. But you have to make sure that household or that business is operating in a functional and positive and goal-driven way as well. So everyone is on the same path to have enjoyment of their own life and to have self-building of their own lives and their own drive, whatever that base is, and that they're reaching the goals and doing what they would like to do in their lives. Because not everybody wants to be a business owner. Some people want security. Some people put the weight of what's important to them to be able to be home to their kids by X time and have flexibility in their work. There's different things that people need. And it's understanding from the get-go, what are those needs that somebody has without getting too personal, because not everyone wants to, but also making sure that when you do hire, that you say, this is the expectations. And of course, things can change in people's lives, and they might have other challenges that changes later. But at the time that you hire them, to say, this is the expectation. We do expect you to be 9 to 5, for example, or we do expect you to work overtime on certain days, take time off. Make sure that you're have an understanding of what the expectations are, and allow employees time to think about whether they want to have this job. And the same thing you would do with a marriage. Allow someone the time to consider whether they want that marriage. And so never rushing into anything without full disclosure of what someone could be in for.
Yeah. Well, I think it would be super helpful to get agreement in a marriage in terms of what's the value you want to create as a family. And same thing in business. We're here to create this value, and here's the part that you're going to play, and get full alignment there. And the big difference, I think, the healthier ones are there supporting each other on the journey to create this collective value, family or business. The ones that aren't so healthy are the ones that are trying to control each other's journey. Like they absolutely know what's best.
It's true. Absolutely true. If I were to control my husband, I never tell him what to do. I only manipulate him, but I don't tell him what to do. So, because once you're in, you've got to figure out a way to make it work. And so marriage is a little bit different than business, but you have to figure out, how do you make something work? And be careful who you marry, because you might have to get out of that later. And the same with employees. Be careful who you hire. Be careful in the first 3 months or whatever the time period is where you want to get out of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you brought it up a couple of times. You go from, hey, let's rent in England. Hey, I wonder what it costs to buy something. And then a castle. Walk us through that. That's what an amazing thing.
It is incredible. We own quite a few properties. Later in life, I've always, and I listened to an interview that you gave as well, and the interviewer was talking about people going without for so very long, and then having to build a business. And that was how I was in my business. I didn't spend money, and I was really focused on making sure the kids got into private school, but couldn't own anything. Owning a house, having that Ferrari or that nice purse or whatever it was, it cost money. It just wasn't something that we could have or I could have. So I wasn't missing it because I wasn't wanting it. I was wanting to make sure we had food on the table for the kids. And by goodness, we never suffered, but that we could put them in private school. That was my main thing, based on what the income was. So later on in life, I never spent any money, and I still, relative to what we have, yes, buy castle, etc. I still watch every dime, and I have to make sensible, smart decisions. So just because I've been able to achieve wealth comparable to the average person, I would say, that it doesn't mean that I waste money or make bad decisions. And I've heard you say that as well. You invest wisely, intelligently, and I try to do that. Now, one would say a castle might not be the smartest investment, and I wasn't looking to buy a castle, but this castle was up for sale when I was curious about the market in England and looked at the castle. The deal had fallen through on the castle for the sellers the day before, maybe 3 days before. So they had a deal that was on the table. It was almost closed. They'd gone through surveys, etc., and it fell through. The buyers pulled out, still in that window of time where they could legally pull out. But the offer that was on the castle was significant for what you could borrow in England at the time. And it's very difficult to get a loan on a castle. It's very difficult to get a loan with mortgage rates being what they are right now, and with people's incomes relative to the mortgage rates, they can't pay the mortgages because the rates are so high. So what would have been about a 2.5% mortgage a few years back, now at close to 6% mortgage, and on a castle, you couldn't even get a mortgage. People can't afford the payments. So I knew that. And I knew the owner was all set. He was already envisioning selling that castle. So I did put an offer in at 50% of what the other offer was. And it was a take it or leave it, and they took it. So I got a 50% of what they were hoping for, which was a fraction of the value of the castle, of the appraised value of the castle and the insured value of the castle. So it was about an eighth of the insured value. And after about 2 months of survey, I got the survey report back. And basically, I would say it's like going to the doctor and saying you want a facelift. And then the doctor says, no, you need a colonoscopy first. So this castle, everything inside that castle, not only did it need aesthetically a lift, it needed everything internal. It needed new plumbing, new wiring, everything. So I put an offer in £1 million less than the half of what the last offer was, and just said, I phoned the broker and said, I'm buying the castle. I'll close tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., but I'm taking $1 million off the price. There's a lot wrong with that castle. That was the day I got the survey back. And I sent over the survey to show that I wasn't playing games. There was a lot wrong with the castle. And it's basically a stone structure built in 1080 that, needed work, everything. So they said they'll never go for it. Well, it happened that within that day, we had an offer from a TV show to do a docu-reality show on the castle. And I didn't tell them that I had pulled on my offer. I could take it or leave it, $1 million less. But they did call back that night and said, we'll take it. And so I remember my husband was going, what did you just do? Just pay. And I said, they'll call, they'll phone. Not to worry. Like you figure out, they saw the survey report. They saw everything that was wrong with it. They know if they've owned a castle for X number of years, what it costs to put a new roof on a building, what it costs to put new boilers and new electrical and sewage and plumbing and pipes. So I ended up with this castle. But the great thing about it is we closed on the television show is that's a marketing arm for a wedding venue. And so, yes, it doesn't seem very smart to buy a castle, but it is a business.
Well, you figured out a way to get what some, including myself, would consider a dream, amazingly cool property and an opportunity to have a cash flow positive between events that you have there and other things. So you've kind of done both. That sounds super smart.
I feel very confident that we're going to have a great run at this castle, regardless of a television show, because everything in the castle is embracing the history of the area and of the building itself, and including the decors. I've gone online and antique auctions, and in the US, you don't have the same kind of thing. And I didn't know this in England either. But they have a massive number of antique auctions and furniture auctions, and every type of auction is going on all the time in England. And so I go online on these auction sites and I'm buying English furniture from different eras to decorate the castle. So it's really fun. And I've learned to put the offer in, and if they don't take it, they don't take it, walk away. But I put a low offer in, and hopefully I get that piece of furniture. And more often than not, nobody else wants that old English bench, or they can't fit a table the size in their home. So I'm getting the furniture that I'd like, slowly but surely.
That's amazing. Are you a year out, 2 years out from having it the way you want? Are you closer than that?
No, probably about 50 years out. It's never going to be.
50 years out.
It's 139 acres and 1,000 years of neglect. It is disastrous. And so I think it's going to be a never ending project. And to get something approved, if you can't put a nail in a wall of a castle. You can put a screw in because you can take it out, but you cannot put a nail in. You can't change anything that was originally in that building. Somebody happened to put something in and sneak it in 40 years ago, like a tile, you could change it, but you still have to get permission.
Well, it sounds like you have a perpetual project that you picked up here, and it'll be a lot of fun to go through. Your book, How to Be Successful in Spite of Yourself. There's a couple of things in there, the self-imposed roadblocks, and so like, why do we do that? And then your statement about leave your crap behind, or something along those lines. Why do we have the roadblocks? And then I wonder if a lot of people even know what they are, like, fully, and to do anything about that.
I don't think people realize the blocks that they put up. And when I've given lectures, it's often to women's organizations, and I talk about empowering yourself and not to give in to marriage and having children too early, and to be the person that you want to be. And then when you do decide to get married or have children, make sure that it's supportive of the person that you want to be, and that you're in a headspace to raise those kids, because it is ultimately important that you look after yourself. But when you have people that are responsible for you, you need to look after them. So the decisions you make are not just for you. And when those lectures are over, and it is always this way, I will get a lineup of women that want to talk to me alone. When they talk to me alone, they are like, you said that, not to follow a negative guy, but I've got this guy and I really love him and I want to get married, and, but yet I want to do this for a living. And it surprises me that you can almost give examples and say something into a crowd of people that want to hear what you're trying to say, and they want to believe it. But yet inside, there's something that drives them that says, no, I am 28 years old, for example, and I should be getting married and having a child now, but I haven't found my career yet. There's something in the way that culturally we are brought up that ingrains us that we have to do certain things in life. And the level of its success is really brought on by our parents. So it might be an Asian family where you're expected to have one child and a house and get married and maybe be a woman and not work, or something like that. And so I use that as an example because culturally that might be what the expectation is. So their idea of success is when they've achieved what their parents have ingrained in them, either by example or by saying, this is what you expect. But I think in any culture that we do ingrain what expectations are. And sometimes those expectations are very low. And sometimes we've come from very abusive or bad backgrounds. But yet we spend our lives following where that expectation is and say that's where success is, or we spend our lives trying to get away from the abuse or the bad expectations or the bad examples we were given, rather than really either through therapy or through self-reflection or through just erasing and putting the crap behind us and taking away that I would say barrier that is so low of what we could do in this world, because there is nothing that we can't achieve if we put our minds to it. It's us that puts that barrier up, and we don't even know it, that we put the barrier up, because to us, the norm, the idea of success was having that Mercedes, having the house, and having the amazing husband who's a dentist, or the beautiful wife with blonde hair and etc. And something that was told to us that Barbie and Ken, in the old sense before the movie, were getting married was the perfect idea of happiness. And if you can put that behind you, if you can get rid of that, and you open that door up and you see a massive unending field, you don't see any barriers, you could see, and you don't look behind you, you can see how important it is to go for everything. And when you do make mistakes, you don't look behind you, you learn from them. And then you keep on going, because you will make mistakes along the way. We call mistakes lessons.
Yeah. Well, I believe that our limits are unknowable. We have no idea, but if we want to go in that direction, we have to start walking, in your case, fully sort of running down that road. Thinking back, I was kicked out of the house at the beginning of my senior year in high school, and came from a super low income family. I never felt like a victim. I kind of felt bad for my parents. I thought they had a difficult time raising themselves, let alone 5 kids and all of it. And so I've always sort of, had this drive and moving forward. And I always thought anything was possible, but most people don't have that mindset. And you talk a lot about how you choose to view something, an event or things is so powerful. I'm, kind of paraphrasing and saying, well, be more intentional about how you want to feel about things. So you're not a victim. It's not your story. It's not an excuse. Talk about that a little bit for our listeners.
Well, it's I believe strongly, at least for me, and I can't say for everyone, that you do good and you do not seek for anyone to ever say thank you, and you don't seek recognition. So I believe that the things that you do for people and in life, you should not look to be thanked. Because when you give a gift, and the gift could be kindness, it could be compassion, it could be monetary or anything, that's a one-way thing. You don't ask for someone to say thank you, and you don't have expectations back. And I do believe that getting recognition for an action should not be what one should seek. You should give the actions and do the actions that you feel are right based on yourself, but not seek recognition for them. The recognition you get is when you can answer to yourself, have you lived your life to this point doing the right thing by every action you take? And you can do that in the smallest things. You can do that by making the person at Starbucks and smile when they looked a little bit bummed out, or they talk back to you. You can do that by when you get in a taxi and you don't acknowledge that somebody it's unkept or something. Just understand that they might not have what it takes to be able to afford a good job. At least they have a real job. So it's by the little small actions that you take and then into the bigger ones, but not to seek acknowledgement for it and not to seek reward. It's, of course, you would do something like that because you have the power. And the more you have, the more I think it's important to have that power to do more good, but not to seek recognition for it. Just do. But that does come along with other things where the more that you have, the more people are going to be asking for things. So you have to kind of learn how to balance that. And that's a tough one. It's a really tough one because down to levels of family, people you work with who want more of a chip off everything because they see that you're more successful, and just even getting solicited for investing in certain things. So you have to learn along the way because it never happens overnight. You have to learn along the way how to manage all of that and how to manage people and their expectations and still be a giving person, but manage that. When you're recognized as possibly you might be that way, is to recognize you have to manage the expectations of people, because oft when you don't know someone and you do have the appearance of having means, often the conversations are 2 different conversations. Somebody wants something. And I say that to my kids. I said, always be careful. When you meet somebody, they're measuring your wallet, whether you have $20 in there that they can get or whether you have $1 million they can get. And if they're not measuring your wallet, they're measuring your parents' wallet. They're measuring your access to money or the access to money from someone else or who you know. So always be aware of that. So go through life, give, but not naively, and be very aware of that evil does exist as well. So live a life giving and of love and kindness and values, but be aware evil exists as well.
Yeah, 100%. I've made mistakes in helping people where it didn't really help, by giving them money and other things, or in the past investing in things based on a story that I was manipulated sort of into. I think we all can kind of go through that learning curve. But I think, if we're going to help, I like, don't do it naively. I love the way you say that. Is it going to help this individual or organization create positive value in the world, or no? And on the no side, it's reinforcing manipulative behavior, parasitical behavior, essentially. They're rigging the game to get something rather than bringing you on their value creation journey, going forward.
Yeah, I do think looking for value alignment now, and I have my hats off to some things in today's society really get to me, because I think that they take it a little bit too far. A lot of things get misinterpreted, but I do think the movements in the last 6 or 7 years has brought a lot of awareness to alignment and being aligned with organizations that have the same values. So whatever those values are, you might look for an organization that is eco-friendly or sustainable or diversity, and there's a lot of conversation around it. So what's right and what's wrong of what you look for in the organizations isn't for this discussion or for anyone other than someone who's running a company to say, where do I align myself with and what's important in it? And I do think that's, as you say, that's very, very important for value alignment.
Well, I think the big challenge today is that there's so much virtue signaling going on the individual basis, but large companies as well, and most of them, when you look behind the scenes, let's say we're for good, so we get more business. It's not let's be good because this creates more value in the world. And so some organizations get it right, a lot of people get it right, and then a lot virtue signal and what I call weaponize false morality or morality under false pretenses to manipulate people to do something that they want. And usually it's about the money only. It's not about the spiritual or emotional energy value creation in combination.
Absolutely. And I think I think it's just like leadership. You cannot go in and say, hey, I'm a leader. You actually have to take actions that establishes yourself as a leader, and those are not tangible actions. So if you were ever to say follow, people will follow. You can't walk in a room and say, hey, everybody follow me. And so that's the same thing with the value creation and with spirituality and with anything in alignment. You have to actually establish the actions, not just say, oh, we're a good company. You actually have to, in the way that you treat people, have the actions, that there is a belief by the employees that you are a fair and good company. And you make the changes when you make mistakes, when you've compensated wrong, or when you've done things, and you admit to those mistakes. It might be naively you've made them. Hopefully it is naively you've made them, and you make the changes. So you'd be willing to self-reflect as an organization and listen to employees when you didn't realize that you were not fairly compensating, not fairly, giving people lunch breaks for the right length of time, or just things that make a difference to happiness in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, really trying to get it right. I call it practicing virtue, creating value in the world, and pushing back on things that take value out of the world. Nobody's perfect in that journey, but those that are really trying, I think that's who we all want to align with. And unfortunately, today in the world, there's so many on the other side manipulating our desire for that. And so just being more thoughtful in how we align to who we do business with, who we hire, the friends that we have. And probably the most important hire ever is the marriage, right?
Yeah, and it is in the book, How to Be Successful in Spite of Yourself. One of the components for me in looking at that and trying to reflect on how do I put that into words is the relationships that you have. And when you're going through life, you're going to be on this moving sidewalk, call it, and you're going through life like that. And you're moving forward, and it's who you pull onto that sidewalk to be there with you. And sometimes they step off the sidewalk, but you see them again and they get back on the sidewalk with you. And that might be long-term friends, childhood friends, your cousin you haven't seen in a long time. But the positive energy people are on that sidewalk with you through life. And if it's a marriage that goes bad, say goodbye. And to that point, I was doing a book tour and on breakfast shows and things. And they kind of like having me on the breakfast shows because I like to have fun. And so they'll have me cooking something, or I would dress up in a garbage bag and wear a garbage bag and say, don't don't wear who you are. It doesn't matter the labels. You could wear anything. It's the person you are. And I talk about that. But I also, at one point, I brought in a garbage bucket, the kind that you open the lid and you push a little foot pedal, but I put down on the coffee table. And at this point, we had a live audience, and it was a televised breakfast show. And I had a little doll, like not a Ken doll, but it looked like a real man in a suit. And I talked about, if you're in a bad marriage, a bad relationship, end it. And I opened the garbage bucket and I put that man in the garbage and shut it. And I said, and don't look back. Get out of a bad relationship. Most women can't get out of a bad relationship. They just can't. They stay in that because they want to make it work. They do it for the kids or they do something. But the funny part about it, which has nothing to do with relationships, I also said, make sure that you eat with purpose, that you are eating healthy, and you eat in your life so that you always have energy, and that you're looking after yourself. And that's important too. Health is too. And I had this fake piece of pizza, and I opened up the garbage bucket, put it in. Well, everyone booed. They would give up a man, but they would not give up pizza. So it's kind of funny when in our minds, where we go is that you're happy to hear to give up a guy, but not happy to hear to give up the bad old pizzas.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it can go both ways. I personally know a lot of men that are staying in relationships that aren't great for them for probably the wrong reasons, and everybody might be happier. I'm not going to judge, though. I'm just here to support on their journey, kind of whatever they want. One thing that you talked about, and in the book, If You Don't Laugh, You'll Cry. The older I get, everything is funnier. Like literally everything is funnier. And then you've got the, dabbling in the promise of eternal youth and being able to accept that probably isn't going to happen. So talk through that. Why did you write the book? What was the motivation around that? I thought that was awesome.
I was writing in my beginning of finance, we were financing medical, dental, and veterinary procedures. And I was at a lecture in Mexico, and the keynote speaker didn't show up. I was walking with the person that ran the lecture, and I was there with my husband because he was speaking at the event, and the keynote speaker didn't show up. Walking with the organizer, and I said, "Look, I do a lot of PowerPoint for finance. I'll put a PowerPoint presentation together. Get one of the doctors here to fill in for the keynote speaker that was coming in from another country, and they had a good reason they couldn't show up." And I said, and do this thing on marketing. And the organizer looked at me and said, "You're giving that talk." And so I was like, "No, I don't want me to give it. I've not given that kind of talk before." He said, "No, you're doing it. See you tomorrow." So I ended up giving a marketing talk, but not based on my experience in marketing. And then I started getting hired by some of the organizations. We're at this medical conference, like Allergan, who's the inventor of Botox, or bought the rights to Botox, and many different types of technology and cosmetic and ophthalmological procedures. So everyone knows Botox, and I got invited by different companies in the cosmetic medical field to talk about marketing. So this started on a whole talking in the cosmetic medical world on marketing. So I started to take my presentation and put them into slides. And then I ended up making a book about marketing in an economic downturn for medical practices. And then later on, I wrote a book on getting yourself on the first page of a Google search, so-called the internet for doctors, how to do that. And I still give those lectures to this day. So about 23 a year. I teach doctors how to get on the first page of a Google search. And I absolutely enjoy that. I enjoy those conferences. But while I was writing the book, I kept thinking about the cosmetic medical world, and I was finding there were some thoughts that came to mind that were funny. And so I started making notes of all the funny little things that came. It's like it's having a warped mind. So I started making the warped mind notes. I ended up with about 100 of these little humorous things. And like one of them, for example, would be this woman with absolutely big breasts and big lips, and going in and asking, she's sitting at a restaurant, and She only wants organic and natural food. And so it's just like the humor that you see when somebody says, no, I only eat organic food, and they're completely overblown and stuff. It's like, okay, you're putting toxin in you. And so I started to do these jokes in the book, and I hired a cartoonist, and then I would draw the cartoon and send it to him. And then he would do it in his own interpretation, which was brilliant. I loved his drawings. And so then I put together that book, and then the Emmys contacted me, and they gave out that book at their awards ceremony one year to all of the, I guess all the actors and actresses got it in their goodie bag. And I thought that was quite an honor. I didn't pay for that. They didn't pay me. And the humor in that book is really about life. It's about not of making fun of cosmetic surgery. It was making fun of us, of people. And life to me is there's birth and there's death, and everything else in between I find absolutely funny. My sister phoned me one time, and she said to me, you're not really funny, and people, you think you're really funny, and I just want you to know that you should know that you're actually not a funny person. And she went on and on, because she always, being a sister, would tell me what to do and would tell me who I was and all this stuff. And she was my older sister, and I would listen to her. And then I said, you actually took the time in your busy schedule to phone me to let me know that I'm not funny. And the purpose of your call is to phone me to tell me I'm not funny. That's actually really funny. And so later on in life, she could see the humor in her actions. And that was kind of interesting for her to see somebody who didn't have a sense of humor to find a way to laugh.
Yeah, I think that's great. Even if I'm the only one that's laughing, even if it's only inside, I feel better. So selfishly, it raises my emotional energy, and that's okay. I found it funny. I'm not looking for the extrinsic motivation. And I think threaded through all of this discussion is it seems like so many people are doing what they think they're supposed to do in life instead of discovering and fully doing what they were meant to do, right?
I think that was talking about what our parents may have instilled in us, or what we've learned from our society that we have developed in our early ages and grown up in. This is what we're supposed to do. And that's what stops us from being entrepreneurs. That's what stops us from taking a great idea and turning it into a business. That's not the only thing that stops us, but that's one of the things, is that the expectations and not being able to achieve, or putting those roadblocks up there.
Yeah. There's so much there. I think about my early childhood, and I had a mother that would actually say things like, "I'm embarrassed to be seen with you in public." And I'm thinking, why would you tell a 5 or 6-year-old kid this? And of course, so this is the baggage you're kind of talking about to leave behind. And it wasn't, I don't know, as an early teenager, I was thinking, hey, this is not about me at all. They're just really struggling, and this is how they lash out, and it's what they do. And
that's interesting that at a young age you would figure that out.
Yeah, maybe it was just that it was so over the top that it made no sense. And I'm watching him interact with others and where it's going, but leaving all that stuff behind and understanding it for what it is, and probably 98% of the time or more, it's not about you at all, right?
It's never about you. It's about the person, and you need to listen to that. But even when you're young, in your case, how do you know it's not right? Because that becomes your norm. It's normal for your mom to say she's embarrassed.
Yeah, the short version of it for me, I'm 6 years old. A neighbor asked me, "Hey, pulls weeds for 25 cents an hour. Would you be willing to do that?" And I'm like, "Well, sure." And back then, I'm 62, you could buy 2 candy bars and have change, with a quarter. So I'm doing that, and then, oh, that was really cool. Then I'm shoveling snow. Then I have paper routes, and so I had this whole exchange of value in the real world, not with friends and family, because you don't know if that's real. They're just helping you. I could trust that, and I built on it, and it protected me from what could have been a really bad situation, just leveraging what the family was doing.
Yes, once you start to realize that you can create your own value and you own that, and that there isn't somewhere else to go, you actually have to be the maker of your own destiny, then when you actually believe that, you believe it, then you can create a lot of things. And you realize the harder you work, the more focused you are. And that means you have to learn too at the same time. You can't just work hard. You actually have to learn and grow and be aware and be self-aware. There's a lot of things that go in that, but they're not difficult things. It's just that you have to be open to growth. Then you can achieve almost anything.
Yeah, one of your 6 principles of success is money matters. And I do find there's so many people in the world virtue signaling saying, oh, that doesn't matter. It can't be about that. Yes, it does. So does emotional and spiritual value creation as well going through. How do you talk about that? When people bring it up, I go right after it and say, of course it matters. But how do you talk about that?
So when money does matter. I mean, it's a driver for many people, but it also gives you the freedom. So make sure that you are making enough money to live your life the way you'd like to. But when you're starting out in something, you might not have that money. So make sure that you are living within your means. It still allows you to invest in the growth for the future. But you also have to be careful when you're making money, that you learn how to make money. You learn how to negotiate. You learn how to have economies of scale, to understand economies of scale, and you learn how to calculate whether you can actually make money from something. So it's very easy to make a lot of money when you've got distribution and you've got mass distribution. It's very difficult to make a lot of money when you're selling to your neighbor, or when you are, as you're weeding something, you only have so much you can do. So money does matter. That's a work ethic to be able to go and weed, but you're only going to be able to make so much money. So you'd want to look at hiring a number of people, or else selling weed eaters. And so money does matter.
Yeah, it's a thing to cultivate. I think where people get in trouble is it becomes way out of balance. It's money first above all others, and then spiritual and emotional energy is separate. In balance, it's amazing. Yeah, cultivating, the financial piece of it. You have another book coming out, I believe next year or this year. Not Your Average Cookbook. When is that coming out? What was your motivation for writing that?
So did my PR person ask you to ask me that? Because they keep asking me when my book's coming out.
They did not, but maybe they're channeling their energy.
So the book is done, but it's still in the graphic layout part of it, and it's just me holding it up right now. So it will be out in the fall. So I was hoping of having it out in the spring, but it will be out in the fall. And it's an incredible book. And it was, the photography in it is phenomenal, and they're actually funny pictures. So all the pictures are very professional, and I hope to do a tour of the photographs that are in the book. But it just in something like in cooking Cornish game hen, I have the Cornish game hen riding a bicycle. And so actually cooked the game hen, put them on a 3 bicycle. I don't know if it's not a tricycle, but a 3-seat bicycle, and then prop them up so they're all riding this 3-seat bicycle. And it's quite brilliant the way the photographer captured all of this and went along with my insane ideas. I barbecued shrimp, and the shrimp are lying on a lounge chair with a miniature barbecue beside them. And so how to cook. So the recipes are good. They're all from scratch. And then all the sauces you can learn how to make in the back of the book. But so you could easily make hoisin chicken. You can buy the hoisin sauce, so you can make it from scratch.
You're making a cookbook fun, infusing humor and positive emotional energy. I love that. As we're wrapping up here, and I literally have 4 days of things to talk about with you, but we have to wrap up. Any final thoughts for our listeners? If they want to learn more about you, anything else you want to add?
I think is to remove barriers, because there is nothing different about where anyone starts from to where they end up and where they are today. If you can remove the barriers of the things that happened in your past or where you are up to this point, and really just look forward, what can you do now without trying to buy the Ferrari when your great idea is being, and I use that as a saying, is you've got to give up a few things and manage your money, but you can get to the goal in business or in life or personally by not carrying the weight of behind. And it doesn't matter where you start in life, because people do it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And my positive emotional energy is elevated just by experiencing, your wisdom, the things you've figured out, and then sharing your journey. This is so cool, and you've got so much more to do. When the cookbook comes out, I'm going to look for it and I'll order it. So hopefully by fall, and maybe sooner, but I'll definitely order it. So, Dr. Kaplan, thank you so much for being here. This has been the Show Your Value podcast, where we explore the art of value creation. If you got value from today's episode, please like and leave a review. And until next time, go forth and create value.